On Good Friday, April the 23rd, 1014, a 51-year-old king knelt inside his tent on the edge of a battlefield north of Dublin, while the screams of dying men rolled across the plain of Clontarf. He had just watched his army break the back of Viking power in Ireland forever, ending a war that had bled the island for 2 centuries. Then a fleeing Norse warlord named Broder slipped past the guard, tore into the tent, and cut the old king down where he prayed. Brian Boru, the last true High King of a united Ireland, died victorious and defenseless in the same hour. His body was carried across the country for 12 days in a funeral procession so vast that entire kingdoms turned out to watch it pass, and he was buried at Armagh, the ancient seat of St. Patrick himself. That single afternoon on the plain of Clontarf did not end a bloodline, it scattered one. And that bloodline is still alive today, hiding in plain sight inside ordinary American mailboxes, school rosters, and family reunions, carried by people who have absolutely no idea that the surname on their birth certificate once belonged to a crowned king. That war had already lasted more than 200 years before Clontarf ever happened. Norse raiders first struck the Irish coast in 795, and by the 9th century, Viking warlords had carved out fortified port cities at Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick that functioned almost as independent kingdoms inside Ireland's borders. Brian Boru spent decades clawing his way from a minor Munster chieftain to undisputed High King, breaking rival dynasties one by one before crushing the combined Norse and Leinster alliance at Clontarf. A victory so complete that Viking power in Ireland never recovered, purchased with roughly 4,000 dead men. That is the kind of story hiding behind an Irish surname, and it is only the first of 15. Brian Boru is only the beginning. Across Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, entire royal dynasties were broken by war, exile, plantation, and famine, yet their names refused to die. Linguists working through the Annals of the Four Masters and the Book of Leinster have traced these surnames back to their royal roots, word by word. Geneticists at Trinity College Dublin have gone even further, identifying Y-chromosome signatures, distinct genetic markers passed from father to son for 1,000 years that match specific medieval dynasties named in the Old Chronicles. Put those 2 fields together and you get something remarkable. A list of 15 surnames that are not just old, not just Irish or Scottish or Welsh, but provably royal. If your last name is anywhere on this list, you're not just descended from immigrants who crossed an ocean. You are descended from men who once sat on stone thrones, wore ceremonial crowns of gold and silver wire, and commanded armies that shaped the history of an entire island. Stay to the very end, because the final name on this list belonged to the single greatest Gaelic king who ever lived, and there is a strong chance you have heard his name before without ever knowing what it cost him. Number 15 is Kennedy. In the Old Irish tongue, the name was written O'Sinead, meaning descendant of Sinead, a nickname that translates roughly to helmeted head or ugly head, a battle name earned rather than given. Sinead was a 10th century chieftain of Dalgy Cass, a warrior kingdom rising along the banks of the River Shannon in what is now County Clare. He fathered a line of sons who would go on to reshape Irish history, and one of those sons was Brian Boru himself, the same king who died at Clontarf. That means every Kennedy walking around today, including the family that produced an American president, carries the direct paternal line of the man who broke Viking rule in Ireland. The Dalcatian court sat at Kincora, a fortress above the cliffs at Killaloe, where kings were crowned on stone chairs blessed by monks, and where sword makers forged the blades that armed Brian's own household guard. If your name is Kennedy, the helmeted crown of the Dalgy Case kings may be sitting quietly in your family tree. The Kennedy family later scattered from Munster into County Wexford, and it was from that Wexford branch that Patrick Kennedy emigrated to Boston in 1849 during the Great Famine, carrying a surname that, without his knowledge, traced straight back to the man who broke Viking power at Clontarf. 4 generations later, his descendant John Fitzgerald Kennedy would take the oath of office as President of the United States. Number 14 is Byrne. In Irish, it is O'Broin, meaning descendant of Bran. And Bran, MacMael was a king of Leinster in the 11th century whose own father, Mael Morda MacMurchada, marched against Brian Boru at Clontarf on the losing side. When Anglo-Norman forces overran Leinster roughly a century later, the Byrnes did not surrender their kingdom, they simply retreated into the Wicklow Mountains and kept fighting from there for 400 years. In 1580, Fiach McHugh O'Byrne led a mountain ambush at Glenmalure that shattered an English column commanded by Lord Grey de Wilton, killing hundreds of soldiers in a single afternoon and becoming one of the most humiliating defeats the English crown suffered in Ireland during the entire Elizabethan era. The Annals of Loch Say still describe the Byrnes as among the most feared warriors of the Eastern Kingdoms. If your name is Byrne, a mountain crown of defiance runs through your blood. Fiach McHugh O'Byrne paid for that victory. English forces captured and beheaded him in 1597, sending his head to Dublin Castle as a warning to every Gaelic lord still holding the mountains. Yet the Byrne name outlasted the men who tried to erase it. Number 13 is Murphy, and this one belongs to nearly everybody, because it is the single most common surname in Ireland today. In Irish, the name is O Murchada, meaning descendant of Murchad, the sea warrior. The Wexford Murphys descend from Murchad mac Diarmata, a king of the Uí Chensalag branch of Leinster in the 11th century, whose own grandfather, Diarmait MacMail na Embo, briefly ruled as Over-King of Southern Ireland. By the 16th century, the Murphys held their own castles, their own private courts, and their own armed retainers across 3 counties in the southeast. Their inauguration mound at Fern still stands in the Wexford countryside, where chiefs were once raised on the shoulders of their people and proclaimed king. If your name is Murphy, you share a royal ancestor with roughly 1 in every 100 people of Irish descent alive today, which makes it the most widely inherited royal bloodline on this entire list. So many Murphys left Wexford during the 19th century emigrations that the name became shorthand for Irish identity itself across Britain, Australia, and America, all while almost nobody carrying it knew it once belonged to a crowned king of Leinster. Number 12 leaves Ireland for the mist and sea lochs of the Scottish Highlands. This is Mackenzie. In Scottish Gaelic, the name is Mac Coinich, son of Coinich the Fair One. The Mackenzies rose as the ruling clan of Kintail, a rugged fjord kingdom on the western coast, ruling from Island Donan, the island castle rising at the meeting point of 3 sea lochs, and later from Brahan Castle further inland. By the 1600s, the Mackenzies controlled more Highland territory than almost any other clan west of the Grampian Mountains, and could raise thousands of armed men within a matter of days. A royal charter from King David II in the 14th century formally named the chief of Kintail a lord of the Western Sea. Their clan motto, Luceo non uro, means I shine, not burn. If your name is Mackenzie, the Sea Lord crown of the Western Highlands belongs to your family line. The Mackenzies expanded so aggressively through the 16th and 17th centuries, absorbing neighboring clans and lands through marriage, purchase, and outright force, that rival chiefs openly complained to the crown that they were becoming too powerful to control. Number 11 crosses into Wales, home to a personal name worn by more native kings than almost any other in the medieval chronicles. This is Griffith. The Welsh original is Gruffydd, and it was carried by 2 of the most consequential rulers in Welsh history. Gruffydd ap Cynan clawed back the throne of Gwynedd in 1075 after years of bloody exile in Ireland and Viking-held Dublin, and went on to rule for more than 50 years, longer than any other native Welsh king on record. His grandson, Gruffydd ap Llywelyn, became the only man in history to briefly unite the whole of Wales under a single crown, a feat no Welsh ruler before or since ever repeated. The surname Griffith is simply the anglicised form of ap Gruffudd, meaning son of Gruffydd, and every Griffith or Griffiths family today descends in a direct patronymic line from one of these kings, recorded in the medieval Welsh law texts known as the Cyfraith Hywel. Their banner once flew above the fortress at Aberfraw on Anglesey, the ceremonial seat of the kings of Gwynedd. If your name is Griffith, the twin crowns of Gwynedd sit inside your family name. Gruffydd ap Llywelyn's unification of Wales in 1055 lasted only a handful of years before his own countrymen turned on him. But for that brief window, a single Welsh king controlled territory no ruler before or after him ever fully held again, and the memory of that unity fueled Welsh resistance for centuries afterward. Number 10 returns to Scotland for the most persecuted clan in Highland history, a family whose motto is itself an act of defiance. This is MacGregor. The clan's Gaelic motto, Es Riogol Mo Dream, means royal is my race, and the clan claims descent from Gregor, said in tradition to be the son of Kenneth MacAlpin, the 9th century king credited with uniting the Picts and the Scots under one crown for the first time. Whether every generation of that genealogy survives strict scrutiny, the MacGregors clung to their royal claim so fiercely that, for 2 centuries, they refused to bow to any lowland lord. In 1603, the Scottish crown outlawed the name MacGregor entirely, making it a hanging offence simply to speak or write it, and forcing every MacGregor alive during that era to live under an assumed surname just to survive: Rob Roy. MacGregor became the legendary outlaw who kept that royal defiance alive well into the 18th century. If your name is MacGregor, you carry a crown the government of Scotland once tried to erase by law and failed. The ban was not fully lifted until 1774, meaning generations of MacGregors were born, married, and died, forbidden from using their own name, forced to register as Grahams, Murrays, or Campbells just to buy land or avoid arrest. Number 9 is Campbell, and by land, ships, and fighting men, the Campbells eventually eclipsed every rival in the Western Highlands, including the MacGregors. In Gaelic, the name is Campbell, meaning crooked mouth, a battle nickname given to an ancestor whose face was reshaped by a sword strike. From that scarred warrior grew the most powerful noble house in western Scotland, the Dukes of Argyll. By the 1500s, the Campbells had married into nearly every royal house in Scotland and commanded the largest private army north of Edinburgh. Their seat at Inverary Castle still overlooks Loch Fyne with cannons mounted along its walls. Campbell chiefs sat as royal regents and cast deciding votes on matters of national war, and in 1692, Campbell soldiers carried out the notorious Massacre of Glencoe, a name still spoken with bitterness across the Highlands. If your name is Campbell, the crooked-mouthed crown of Argyll runs through your veins. The massacre at Glencoe was carried out under a government warrant against the MacDonalds for supposed disloyalty, and the betrayal cut deeper because Campbell's soldiers had accepted their host's hospitality for nearly 2 weeks before turning on them at night. Number 8 belongs to a dynasty whose kingdom was built entirely of water, wind, and warships. This is MacLeod. In Gaelic, it is MacLeod, son of Leod, and Leod was the son of Olaf the Black, a Norse Gaelic king who ruled the Isle of Man and the Hebrides in the 13th century. That single lineage makes every MacLeod today a descendant of a crowned sea king who once controlled the entire chain of Western Islands. The chiefs of Clan MacLeod still hold Dunvegan Castle on the Isle of Skye, one of the oldest continuously inhabited castles in Scotland, predating most European royal houses still standing. Inside, Dunvegan hangs the fairy flag, a silk banner the clan believed could summon supernatural aid in the middle of battle, and which modern testing has dated to somewhere between the 4th and 11th centuries. MacLeod warships once patrolled from Orkney in the far north down to the Isle of Man. If your name is MacLeod, the Sea King crown of the Hebrides belongs to your bloodline. Clan tradition holds the fairy flag can only be unfurled 3 times to save the clan in true crisis, and that it has already been used twice, once to win a battle and once to end a cattle plague, leaving one final use in reserve. If you have made it this far, the 7 strongest bloodlines on this list are still ahead of you, and the final 3 ruled kingdoms so ancient that even the Roman Empire never dared set foot on their shores. While the sea kings of the Hebrides ruled the northern waters, an even larger island empire was gathering its fleet in the Sound of Mull, and that empire produced the next name on this list. Number 7 is MacDonald. In Gaelic, it is MacDonald, son of Donald, and Donald was the grandson of Somerled, the 12th century Norse Gaelic warlord who broke Norwegian control of the Hebrides and forged the lordship of the Isles. Somerled's fleet crushed Norse naval power in the western seas around 1156, and his descendants took the title Lord of the Isles, ruling a floating kingdom stretching from the Isle of Skye all the way down to the northern coast of Ireland. Scottish kings were forced to sign formal treaties with the lords of the Isles as though negotiating with an equal sovereign nation, not a subject clan. When the Crown finally dissolved the lordship in 1493, the MacDonalds had already become the single largest Highland clan in Scottish history. Modern Y-chromosome testing has identified a genetic signature traced directly back to Somerled himself, a marker now carried by tens of thousands of MacDonald men across Scotland and North America. If your name is MacDonald, the fleet throne of the Lord of the Isles belongs to you. King James IV formally abolished the lordship in 1493, precisely because the MacDonalds had grown powerful enough to negotiate directly with England behind Scotland's back, and its collapse left a vacuum that fueled clan feuds for the next 2 centuries. Now the story crosses back to Ireland, because the next 4 surnames belong to the 4 greatest Gaelic royal dynasties the island ever produced. Number 6 is O'Sullivan. In Irish, it is O Suiliabhain, meaning descendant of Suiliabhan, roughly translated as the one-eyed or hawk-eyed warrior. The O'Sullivans served as the military backbone of the Eoganachta, the ancient royal dynasty of Munster, whose kings were crowned at the sacred hilltop of the Rock of Cashel, a limestone outcrop still topped today by a ruined cathedral and round tower that served as the coronation seat of the southern kings of Ireland for roughly 6 centuries. In the brutal winter of 1603, the O'Sullivan chief, Donald O'Sullivan Bear, led roughly 1,000 of his people on a desperate midwinter march north across Ireland to escape an English army after the catastrophic Irish defeat at Kinsale. Fewer than 40 of them survived the journey. That march is still taught in Irish schools today as one of the greatest single acts of clan endurance in the nation's history. If your name is O'Sullivan, the one-eyed crown of the Munster kings belongs to your family. That march from Glengariff to County Leitrim covered roughly 200 miles of hostile winter territory, crossing the Shannon under fire and fighting off English cavalry along the way. And the handful who survived became founders of an O'Sullivan diaspora that spread across the world. Number 5 is McCarthy, whose ancestors sat above the O'Sullivans in the royal hierarchy of Munster. In Irish, it is MacCarthy, son of Carthach, a name meaning the loving one. The McCarthys ruled Desmond, the southern half of the old kingdom of Munster, from strongholds including Blarney Castle, home of the famous Blarney Stone, and Muckross Abbey near the lakes of Killarney. The head of the family, known as McCarthy More, the Great McCarthy, was crowned in stone ceremonies whose ritual roots reach back into pre-Christian Ireland. In 1565, Queen Elizabeth I formally recognized Donald McCarthy as Earl of Clancair, making him one of the very few native Gaelic Irish lords the English crown was ever politically forced to acknowledge as royalty through an actual treaty. The Book of McCarthy, Rec, an illuminated Gaelic manuscript, still records the family's genealogy back roughly 30 generations to the ancient Ioganachta kings. If your name is McCarthy, the southern crown of Desmond belongs to your bloodline. Blarney Castle became so associated with clever, evasive talk during negotiations with the English crown that the word Blarney entered the English language from those exchanges, a legacy that has outlived the power that created it. Number 4 moves north to the one region of Ireland where Gaelic royal power survived longer than anywhere else in the country, and arguably longer than most native dynasties survived anywhere in Europe. This is O'Donnell. In Irish, it is O Domhnaill, descendant of Domhnall, a name meaning world ruler. The O'Donnells were princes of Tyrconnell, the wild Atlantic kingdom covering what is now County Donegal. Their inauguration site was a stone chair on the hill of Kilmacrenan, where a hereditary poet placed a white rod into each new chief's hand in a ceremony whose form stretched back to the Iron Age. The greatest of the line was Red Hugh O'Donnell, who escaped from Dublin Castle in January of 1592 at the age of 19 after 4 years, chained in an English dungeon, and rode north through the snow to reclaim his throne. He went on to lead the Northern Gaelic army through the 9 Years' War against Queen Elizabeth's forces. When the war was finally lost, Red Hugh sailed to Spain to beg for reinforcements and died at Simancas Castle in 1602, poisoned, according to Spanish court records, by an English agent sent specifically to silence him. If your name is O'Donnell, the storm crown of Tyrconnell belongs to your bloodline. Red Hugh's brother, Rory O'Donnell, joined Hugh O'Neill and other Gaelic lords in the flight of the Earls, sailing from Lough Swilly into permanent exile, a voyage historians treat as the symbolic end of the old Gaelic aristocratic order. Number 3 sat above even the O'Donnells in ancient Irish rank, and the final 2 names on this list are the oldest royal bloodlines in the entire Celtic world. This is O'Connor. In Irish, it is O Conchobair, descendant of Conchobar, meaning hound of battle. The O'Connors were kings of Connaught from the 10th century onward, and 2 of them wore the title of High King over the entire island of Ireland. Turlough O'Connor, born in 1088, built some of the very first stone castles ever raised in Ireland and issued some of the earliest native Irish coinage on record. His son, Rory O'Connor, became the last man to hold the title of true High King of Ireland when he claimed it in 1166. It was Rory who signed the Treaty of Windsor with King Henry II of England on October the 6th, 1175, a formal document recognizing Rory as King of the Irish outside the areas already under Anglo-Norman control. Every O'Connor alive today descends directly from the man who wore the very last native high crown of an independent Ireland. If your name is O'Connor, that last crown belongs to you. Turlough. O'Connor also commissioned the Cross of Cong, a jeweled processional cross built to house a fragment of the true cross sent by the Pope, which survives today in the National Museum of Ireland as one of the finest examples of medieval Irish metalwork. Even the O'Connors, though, traced their royal line back to an older dynasty still, and number 2 belongs to the family that ruled longer than any other royal house in Irish, and arguably in European history. This is O'Neill. In Irish, it is O Nail, descendant of Niall, and that Niall was Niall of the 9 Hostages, the legendary 5th century warlord whose raiding fleets reportedly reached as far as Britain and Gaul, and who founded the Uí Nail dynasty that would go on to dominate most of Ireland for roughly the next 600 years. Modern genetic research out of Trinity College Dublin identified a distinctive Y-chromosome haplotype, catalogued as RM222, carried by an estimated 2 to 3 million men worldwide whose paternal roots trace back to Northwest Ireland. And researchers have linked that specific genetic signature directly to the Uí Nail dynasty, descending from Niall's line, making it one of the most successful royal bloodlines ever documented by modern science. The O'Neills held the sacred inauguration site at Tullyhogue in County Tyrone, where their kings were crowned upon the Leek na Rí, the Stone of Kings. In 1598, Hugh O'Neill nearly drove the English out of Ireland entirely at the Battle of the Yellow Ford, remembered as one of the worst defeats English forces suffered anywhere during the entire Elizabethan era. If your name is O'Neill, 6 centuries of the Uí Nail crown belong to your bloodline. Hugh O'Neill joined the flight of the Earls in 1607, ending his reign in exile in Rome rather than Ireland, closing out roughly 1,400 years of Uí Nail dominance in one of the most abrupt endings any European royal dynasty has experienced. And that brings the story back to where it began, to the single surname that stands above every other Celtic royal name on this list. Number 1 is O'Brien. In Irish, it is O'Brien, descendant of Brian, and that Brian was Brian Boru, the High King who unified the Gaelic kingdoms of Ireland and shattered Viking military power at the Battle of Clontarf on Good Friday. the 23rd of April, 1014. Every O'Brien alive today is a direct male line descendant of Brian himself, a claim supported both by the genealogies preserved in the Annals of the Four Masters and by modern Y-chromosome testing that has traced a distinct genetic marker through generations of O'Brien men. Brian was killed in his own tent on the very day of his greatest victory, cut down while praying by the fleeing Viking warlord Broder, in one of the cruelest ironies in Irish military history. His body was carried across the country in a royal procession lasting 12 days before he was buried at Armagh, the ancient ecclesiastical capital founded by St. Patrick himself. The O'Brien chiefs went on to rule the kingdom of Thomond for another 600 years after Brian's death, and their descendants later sat in the British House of Lords as earls and marquises of Thomond. The O'Brien coat of arms still displays 3 lions passant, and the family motto reads, Lam Laidir and Washtar, the strong hand uppermost. If your name is O'Brien, you carry the crown of the greatest Gaelic king Ireland ever produced. 15 surnames, 3 nations, and more than 1,000 years of kings, and every one of them survived war, exile, conquest, plantation, and famine, to end up sitting quietly on birth certificates, mailboxes, and gravestones across America today. Somewhere between the Battle of Clontarf in 1014 and this very moment, these bloodlines crossed oceans in the pockets of men who had no idea what they were carrying. Farmers and dockworkers and soldiers who never once suspected their family name had once belonged to a king crowned on a stone chair. If your surname appeared anywhere on this list, take a moment and look into your own family tree, because the Annals, the genetic record, and 13 centuries of Irish, Scottish, and Welsh history all agree on one thing. That name did not start as an ordinary name. It started as a crown. Tell us in the comments which surname belongs to your family and how far back you have traced it, because the next bloodline we uncover might be the one hiding inside your own name.